Hello everyone and welcome to the Proudfoot podcast. Today I'm going to talk about how I successfully created a level 0 system for D&D that my players all loved. So before we get into that, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more D&D and TTRPG related content. Okay, so getting into it, why did I bother making a level 0? Isn't level 1 weak enough? Well, there are 3 reasons that I decided to do this. One of them being that it was for a narrative purpose. So the narrative purpose was from my elevator pitch, which was you guys are all sent to my version of the Abyss. I made it clear that it was kind of like D&D's Abyss, but I was going to have my own twist on it, so don't read too much into that. And there was this idea that they had lost their souls. So the whole point of the campaign is you're trying to reconnect with your soul so you can become whole again. So I made level 0 because I thought, well, you're lesser than a level 1 character because you're soulless. So I'm going to play into that aspect and make some creative homebrew decisions that mechanically I think are going to be fun to play. And much to my hope, my players have had a lot of fun doing this. So I'm going to talk about how I successfully did this and what I would recommend if you're trying to homebrew big changes to any sort of RPG, specifically D&D, but this will apply in general to any RPG you want to play. So basically there were 4 aspects to this. First was ability scores. Because they're soulless, their wisdom and constitution was automatically 1. And I'll talk about the implications of that later on. The other ability scores either were going to get a 6, 8, 8, and 10. That was their standard array they had to pick from. So obviously the martial classes put 10 in strength, the casters put 10 into their spell casting ability, and then the 8 and 6s were thrown around as they wanted to. Now I said don't panic because these are going to improve as we go. I mentioned that incremental leveling. Part of those increments is going to be ASIs that I worked with a couple of the players to make sure that it was going to be balanced. They were going to end up where you'd want to be for a standard level 1 character. And that's the first tip I'd say. If you're going to build these big homebrew things, remember that the number 1 rule of any RPG is that everyone at the table is having fun. So you can have a lot of fun making the homebrew rules, but if your players don't enjoy playing with those rules, then it was all for naught because no one's going to be having fun with these rules that you spent a lot of time making. So what I did is I crafted the rules and then I did a iteration process where I went to my players, said, here's the rules, and we worked on refining them so that it would be fun for them. So what I wrote out initially wasn't what we ended up playing with, but what I'm showing you today is what they ended up using and what they're having a lot of fun with. So that was the first step, was their ability scores. The second was their race. I said you could pick literally any race, and then what I did is I took custom lineage from Tasha's Cauldron, and I said all you're going to get is your size, so they could be small or medium, speed, which was going to be 30 feet for all, dark vision of 60 feet, which again, not all races get, but I was giving them dark vision for a narrative reason because part of this soullessness is that they were in the abyss and they were technically dead. So like undead creatures, they didn't have to sleep, eat, drink water, and there were other things that happened with them, but they weren't undead, they were dead. So then I had additional rules that I was putting in. And that was the first bit. But then again, I said, don't panic because you're still going to be able to get your racial abilities. It's just going to come in that incremental leveling. So this does make more work for me, but I've been having fun doing it and I like doing this sort of work. So I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you like giving yourself more to do, which I know a lot of DMs love spending hours prepping campaigns and thinking about it. So this might be up your alley. The third part was classes. So obviously I didn't really feel like taking every single class and then reducing it down to a level 0 version. So what I did was I decided to group them into 3 groups. We had our non-magical classes, that's barbarians, fighters, monks, paladins, rangers, and rogues. Non-magical. I know rangers and paladins get magic, but that's at level 2. We're not going to worry about that right now, because at level 0, they're 2 away from level 2, so they don't have magic. So they're considered non-magical. Then there is the nose magic, which would be your charisma casters effectively. So your bards, your sorcerers, and your warlocks. And they will have different rules than the other kinds of casters, which I called granted casters. That is the ones that prepare spells, so your clerics, your druids, and your wizards, although they had their own special rules in this system. So the big thing here was that spellcasters, if you look at the full casters, they all start with 2 first level spell slots. That's just a pretty standard thing for casters. I mean, warlocks have a caveat, but luckily we didn't have any warlocks, so I didn't have to worry about how that was going to work for them. And if we had a warlock, I would have talked to them specifically about what would have been best for them, because I didn't want to make one class better than the others at level 0. I wanted them to all feel roughly the same. For the fighters or the non-magical root classes, they get battle courage and parry. So battle courage, as it says here, on your first weapon attack of a combat encounter, add a d4 to the attack roll. If your attack is successful, make a second weapon attack against the same target as a bonus action, no additional d4 this time. So basically it allows you to have 2 attacks, which is really nice for starting out, especially given that so much has been taken away and they're so weak in so many other regards. Having that second attack really helped them in a lot of fights. It actually made it so the non-casters felt almost a little bit more powerful than the casters in some degree, but I'll talk about how the casters were powerful in a second. So parry is this defensive move that you're able to do where on the first turn of combat as a bonus action, you can take a defensive position. This will allow you to add 1d4 to your AC against attacks you can see coming. So if you're surprised, it doesn't count. On your turn, you can continue to use your bonus action to parry. The effect ends if you are successfully dealt damage. So basically what happens is you roll the d4 and then that would permanently apply to your AC until you're hit. If you don't do this on the first turn though, you don't get to continue to do it. So it's kind of like battle courage or parry. What players often did in practice is they would try to attack. If the attack failed, they wouldn't use battle courage because I said they could declare it after they saw if it was a success or fail, and then they could use parry instead. And that was just to give them more options so they didn't feel like they were too boxed in, because the whole point of this level 0 is to give them the flexibility to be creative. And because these are homebrew rules, I get to make those decisions, and ultimately when it comes down to making any mechanical decision for me as a DM, I always ask myself the question, what would be the most fun for everyone? And it doesn't impede my fun to let them do this, and it would be more fun for them if they got to do more stuff. So that's why we ruled it that way. So that's what the non-magical users get. And then the knows magic, which are 2 of our players because we have a sorcerer and a bard, they get foggy memory and reliable cantrip. So basically I picked the cantrips they would get and they were all okay with this, which is why it worked. But if you're doing this or if you try to do something like this, make sure that you have an open dialogue with your players about picking their cantrips for them, tell them why it's the case, and make sure they're still able to do stuff. So the cantrips I picked for the sorcerer were Ray of Frost, which is a good damage cantrip, and Mending, which may not be everyone's choice as a sorcerer, but I'll talk about why Mending is good for the campaign later on. And it's actually mentioned in the podcast many times, so you'll also pick that up there. The bard got Vicious Mockery and Thunderclap, which some would argue is really great because they're both damage cantrips. And, you know, that's fair enough. I just thought it would be nice for the bard to have reliable damage, especially early on when they're going to have the first one here, which is Foggy Memory. So the way Foggy Memory works is you roll a charisma check, and then depending on how well you do on the charisma check, you get to exclude certain keywords from the list of spells. So here is the table of spells, and you can see this column here has all the keywords. This is for the bard, so they have a bunch of utility spells, and if we have only combat spells for the bard, they actually have a really good chance of getting something pretty decent. For the sorcerer, we have a very similar table. These, again, are all the spells that we're allowing in the game, which is pretty much all the spells available in the official D&D books. And it, again, has the different utilities. So what happens is that they do their charisma roll, and let's say they get a 15. So they get to exclude 2 keywords. So I go down to, we have one for our player Emily, who's a bard, and we have one for our player Clay, who's a sorcerer. So they get to exclude, let's say, utility and healing, because I believe, yeah, exclude 2 of the 3 keywords. So then we just run this and we see that the spell that Clay recalls is Ray of Sickness. And then they have the ability to potentially cast this spell. Again, let's say we did it for the bard, and the bard rolled a 18, so they get to exclude 2 words. So in this example here, they would have rolled Dissonant Whispers. And then what Foggy Memory says is that you can cast the spell until the end of your next turn. So you get to do this as a bonus action in combat, so you could use your action to cast the spell, or you could wait a turn. You could also ready an action to cast the spell as well, and then see if something happens. So there was options for Foggy Memory. But again, remember that the casters only have 1 spell slot per long rest, so it's not like they're using this feature that often anyway. So the fact that out of combat you could only recall as a bonus action never really became much of an issue, because I asked the players to just, within reason, restrict themselves from using it constantly until they got what they wanted, and they respected that. And also, you only have 1 spell slot a day, so you're not really going to want to do it a lot. So they really relied on their cantrips as the main focus for attack here. So moving on to the last root class, which was granted magic. So this encompassed clerics, druids, and wizards. Now we didn't have a cleric or druid in the campaign, but we did have a wizard. And the wizard's interesting because they actually had a special caveat for rules, especially because of the way prepared spells work. So granted magic users got two things. They also got reliable cantrip. It's just different cantrips. The wizard got firebolt and prestidigitation. Pretty good stuff. And then they also have staple spells. So instead of foggy memory, where there's a chance of recalling any spell, they just got given a certain number of spells. So the cleric would have gotten these 3 spells, the druid these 3, and the wizard got these 3 spells. So that's the wizard. They got reliable cantrip, which was firebolt, prestidigitation, and then they got these 3 spells. Once they got their spellbook, they were able to ritual cast comprehend languages normally. Up until that point, they had to spend an extra 30 minutes in order to ritual cast if it wasn't prepared. If it was prepared, then they could ritual cast with the regular 10 minutes. But they got their spellbook very early, so that rule was kind of a non sequitur. So the last part of this class 0, and the reason it worked so well, was having session improvements every session or every other session. The idea was that the session improvements would be tied into what they did in that specific session. So if they didn't do enough, I didn't give them their session improvement, but they always got it every session or every other session at the worst. Now, there's 9 here, and they're all titled. So the first one was they got their armor, weapon, and tool proficiencies from their class. The second was an ASI. The way I did ASIs was they got to distribute 4 points amongst all of their scores, except for Con and Wiz, because those had special rules. And they could only put a max of 3 in each. I'll come back to the special rules in a second. Then they got their skill and saving throw proficiencies that they would get from their class. They got racial traits. They'll get minor traits, major traits, and final traits at different increments. And basically for all of their races they picked, I broke them up into what I considered the minor, major, and then the final. And I talked with each player specifically about this to make sure that it felt right to them, because that was very important to me, is that everyone had fun with these homebrew rules. As I've said before, the only point of these games is to have fun. So when I do homebrew like this, I want to make sure that the players have as much opportunity to give feedback and help me craft the rules in a transparent sense, because effectively I'm managing how their character is going to level up. So they should have a big say in that to make sure that it's going to feel right for them. And that was always respected at every step here. So their traits were broken up. And in fact, we actually gave them a lot of parts of feats to kind of fill in the blank between some races that got a lot more. So depending on what race they were playing, they got their standard array, or there was a human. So I ended up buffing the human by giving a lot of extra stuff. So they all kind of felt more powerful than if they would just leveled up from 1, 2, so on and so forth. Then another ASI, so same rules again. Then they got their class features, so that's basically all the features you'd get from your class at level 1. So now they're really breaking closer to a level 1 from their level 0. They got their major racial trait, another ASI, and then their final racial trait. So that was the level up scheme, and I want to come back to why I didn't let them put in Constitution and Wisdom. It's because of the narrative story of As Below, So Above. They've lost their souls, and then what I thought is, well, let's have Constitution and Wisdom be stats that are tied to your soul, not your physical body. So they're effectively these dead creatures, and dead creatures have different rules. One of them is that their Constitution and Wisdom is 1. So when they regain their souls, they're going to go through special rules to get those stats back. The other aspect of being dead, besides not needing to sleep, eat, or drink, is that their wounds don't heal. So they don't have HP. In fact, what I did is I said, your HP is effectively exhaustion. So I took the exhaustion rules and I mashed it with their HP. And it might sound like something that's not up your alley, and that's fair because I don't think this would be for everyone. I don't know if I'd do it again. It was a fun thing to try, and my players are having fun with it, but basically every type of damage they get is 1 level of exhaustion. And classically in D&D, if you have 6 levels of exhaustion, you just die. So the players know that whatever death looks like for someone who's dead comes if you get 6 types of damage or 6 levels of exhaustion. The only way they can get exhaustion, because they don't need to sleep, eat, or drink, is from getting damage. So if they get piercing damage over and over again, that's 1 type of damage. So that means they only have 1 level of exhaustion. If they get piercing, bludgeoning, slashing, fire, and cold, that's 5. Now, you might be asking, if they are dead, how do they heal? I said they don't heal. So the way they are able to remove types of damage is with med kits. So basically they don't heal from long resting. They still recover all their spell slots and all their abilities that would recover from a short or long rest. They get those back. but in order to heal, they have to expend uses of medkits, and there's a homebrew for this. So normally a medkit is used in combat with a DC 10 medicine check to stabilize someone. They can do that DC 10 medicine check, although I make them do intelligence-based medicine because I'm not cruel and their wisdom is 1. They do an intelligence-based medicine check to remove 1 type of damage from another player. So they can't heal themselves with it, they have to heal someone else. And in combat, the person who's doing the healing has to make the call on what type of damage is removed. On a short rest, they can expend 1 of these to heal another person, and 2 people can heal each other at the same time. They don't have to do a check for that, it just happens. So if they want to take a long rest, then they can figure out how many heals they can do. And basically they're finding med kits all around. Kind of like in a video game when you just find the things in random spots you need to heal. I'm kind of dumping that for them because of the setting. It was just the only way to do it, and everyone's having fun with it. So if it seems incredulous and stupid to you, that's fair. It might be, but we're all having fun doing it. So I think we're doing the right thing because, again, the only thing that matters is that you have fun. Okay, that's everything I want to talk about. Those are the homebrew rules for my level 0 in the As Below, So Above D&D campaign that'll be coming out on this YouTube channel on September 10th. If people are interested, I can supplement that with commentary about what I was thinking as a DM or some post notes, something like that. So let me know in the comments if any of that sounds interesting, or if you have any questions about how this whole homebrew system works that I didn't quite get to and you're having questions, I'm happy to answer anything about that in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more D&D and TTRPG related content. If you like the 80 Proudfoot podcast, you can follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or TikTok. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.